if you don't just factor in the fact that we are bred into thinking that our penis is an extension of our masculinity, and when our penis is not working, then there's something directly wrong with our masculinity. There's really direct line to our ego and our view of ourselves. Yeah. So we can't even begin to dismantle all of the ideas that are locked in around the notion of your penis not working. There's just too much metaphors there and too much ideas built up around it and self-identity issues.
The man is usually to be blamed, right? Like, I think one of the biggest takeaways for me that I learned later on that I wish I knew in my early 20s is that sex is a two-way street, right?
Definitely. I think at times you're not necessarily in the driving seat or should be in the driving seat all the time. Sometimes, you want to be loved and you want to be appreciated, or, you want to be aroused. The science on this is, it's clear there's also cycles that men go through, in terms of a certain amount of testosterone, or their willingness to engage in sexual activity can sometimes be tested in different times of the day.
Yo, you made it. My name is Omar Shaker, and I'm honored to welcome you to the Gumcast, where we have deep conversations about the human spirit and what keeps us going despite the shittiness of it all. Our goal is to encourage you to feel seen, heard, and understood. So tune in for real and raw conversations and become part of them on findgumption.com. Yo, Darsh.
Hey, Shaker, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Welcome to this very special episode of the Gumcast, and it's so great to have you here.
Thanks, man. It's always good to be on the Gumcast. I've haven't been on before, but it feels like I've.
Yes. Well, you have a lot to express, and I'm excited for the audience to get a flavor of who you are and what you have to offer in terms of experience. But as you know, today I've chosen a very complicated topic, and I felt like I wanted to also invite Khaled Salem back. Welcome back, Khaled.
Hey guys, happy to be back. Hey Darsh.
Hey man.
Hey buddy.
It's good to see you.
Welcome to the Gumcast.
Thanks.
Khaled, how does it feel to be back? You're the very first returning guest, by the way.
It is an honor that I will try to live up to. It does come with a little bit of pressure, but I think given today's topic, I was very happy to hear that you wanted me back. So thank you for having me back.
You are very welcome. Thanks for taking me up on this again, even though our last episode has been a particularly tough one, but these seem to be the ones that please the crowds. So thanks for coming back and be willing to tango. It's really a great side effect of the Gumcast to be able to hang out with my friends and have extended conversations with them, even though the three of us are in different countries right now. But it's a really exciting thing. I think it makes this podcast really fun, especially hanging out with the two of you. We've known each other since we were like 14, 15, maybe even younger. And we're all 35, 36 maybe?
Yeah, I turned 36.
You turned 36?
Last year.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. But I think that's definitely, that's how it feels like I've been on this Comcast podcast, before. So it really does come across as a labor of love and a very personal, real labor. And, having witnessed you blossom and grow, I see, many tendrils, many, aspects of it in your story. So I feel like I'm already sort of intimately, a subject somehow. But it feels even better to be on it right now.
Yeah.
So excited.
Yes, same here. Thank you for your words. And it's really like a big theme of this project is, what keeps us going. And so the topic that I chose today is what keeps us going when our penises aren't going. What is the plural of penis, by the way? Is it peni or penises?
That's a good question. I think it's, Peni makes sense, but I have a feeling that it can't be it. Khaled, any ideas?
I'm sure will be one of the very many errors that we will have throughout the entire podcast. I have no idea, but I would go with peni maybe.
Oh, really? I was hoping you'd go with penises, and so
Yeah, me too. But that's cool. That I think really encompasses the spirit of today's episode, which is that we are not coming at it as any kind of experts, but we are three friends trying to untangle a really complicated and personal topic that is frequently called erectile dysfunction. And as someone who has studied medicine, I actually try to get away from this idea of erectile dysfunction because it seems so like medicalized and mechanical, and it encompasses a bigger part of our psyche, right? And Darsh, you were saying while we were preparing for this episode that there is kind of a difference between psychological ED and philosophical ED, and this whole concept of gumption comes from the Zen and art of motorcycle maintenance, and it's really kind of interesting to bring that to this episode because the idea of the motorcycle not working and the whole debate in the book between rational ways to maintain and fix the motorcycle, which I think is kind of the medicalized classical way. And there's also like the romanticized idea of a motorcycle / our penis working or not working, being on the highway. So why don't you set the tone for us with kind of like, how are you approaching this, and what kind of tone can we set for this conversation?
Yeah, so I think when you first mentioned this topic, it's not something that the memory was not buried in my mind, or so it was quite easy to remember the first situation, the first time it happened, when I had second thoughts, when I had doubts. I think sort of that's philosophically at the heart of this, is that it's a situation where you're not quite sure how to proceed, and there's a lot of anxiousness at the time. I was quite young, so I was around maybe 24, 25, if I recall correctly. I was, specifically, I was working a very stressful job, one that similar to the one that I hold until today. And at that day in particular, I was heading back, and there was a particular friend was seeing at the time. And from a particularly stressful day, I thought it would be a really great opportunity to kind of de-stress by, visiting and spending some time and relaxing and so on. So, it was very strange how it all happened. What was once, a worry that I had banished to the back of my mind suddenly came to the forefront. And the analogy of the motorcycle is perfect because you don't really think about the nuts and bolts until you have to, and, it's almost like you're forced to acknowledge the whole topic. But at that time, I wasn't one to think about it that way, and particularly when it comes to at least the right way to think about it. So I was definitely overthinking the wrong things. So I would think about, the techniques that I would use. I would think about the things that I would say. I would think about, the different sort of machinations that I would deploy in my exploits. But I never really thought about, and so in that sense, it almost felt like it was very rational, like very cause and effect driven, expectations driven, really like setting a performance benchmark. It's really quite measurable, maybe, gaining inspiration from my line of work. But yeah, on that day in particular, it somehow, I guess it was a really stressful day. It didn't really work the way I had planned it. We were intimate, but it didn't quite, reach that point. So I remember clearly thinking at the time that this is insane. This is very strange that I should not be feeling this way, that I should not, I'm only 24. Why am I sort of experiencing this? And I remember that I just immediately tried to shut down the interaction. And it didn't particularly become dramatic, but I will never forget sort of how I must have made her feel, because for better or for worse, I communicated something that was very raw, very real in myself at the moment, that anxiety. But at the same time, I just completely shut her down. We, have to come to not terms, but maybe come to a realization that it's not a mechanical point, but more subtle than that, touches on many elements of our life, can be evident in different facets, whether it's physical, psychological, or philosophical. And so, we have to really, take a step back and look at the big picture and see how all of this comes together. And maybe we can get some wisdom from the moments that work, but I think that's not particularly, smart, given that, the complexity that's involved. And so we need to kind of take this as it comes to us, right? And understand what this means to us as we discover more about ourselves.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. The story, so that story that you shared, was that your first sexual encounter, or was it?
It was my first sexual partner. So the story itself was actually maybe a few months after meeting her. It was the same person that I had sex with the first time. So it was actually quite, everything was quite new for me. And my thoughts were that it couldn't possibly go wrong so quickly, so soon. I was quite distraught at that idea, the possibility of it going off track like that. And in retrospect, I think in that sense, the physicality of it, I can laugh about it right now because, thankfully, I no concerns there. But in other sense, it was also the first time that I had this fear.
Thank you there for sharing so much. I do have a question. I wonder, because you mentioned that the feeling or the worry, as it were, that you experienced then is not the same that you experience now. I wonder what aspect of that experience lingered on and stays with you until today.
Yeah, there's always that question, am I, healthy enough? I mean, I made some poor dietary and lifestyle decisions at some point, and I constantly wonder. But ultimately as well, these are all sort of marks that we leave on the body, but I also wonder about the marks that we've left on the mind, and whether I can, if I become more cynical or more jaded or more doubtful or more skeptical of life, whether that has some kind of mirror into into this experience. And I mean, at that point in time, I was experiencing a lot of stress. Perhaps this continues. Perhaps this idea of how stress affects me vis-a-vis like my performance or vis-a-vis my capacity, my libido. That I take that with me a lot, and I tend to try to really kind of bring that to the forefront, and I try not to overstress myself. I actively try to avoid stressing myself, and so I just accept. There's a brutal acceptance that I try to practice, which is just, even if I am not performing as well as I would want to ideally perform, it doesn't matter, as long as what is actually happening is that I'm not as stressed out as I was a few moments ago. Or so for me, it's become a practice of trying to figure out, how do I feel at the moment? Is it anxiety? Is it the stress? Is it some kind of guilt? Is it some kind of emotion that's overhanging? And I try to dispel that emotion while I'm in the moment.
I completely relate to that aspect of it. Being self-aware, I think, goes a long way in terms of understanding what is actually going on. And I think it gives you the best opportunity to actually be able to deal with it. But I was actually more interested in the interrelationship dynamic, because you mentioned something very interesting. You shut down your partner at that time. And I wonder if you developed any tools for ensuing relationships, to how to deal with your partner at that moment, and how to best engage them in the situation, as opposed to just doing the thing that feels
Great question.
that feels like reflexive at that moment, which is to just like hide and push.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, that's the moment. I try to communicate my appreciation, my love, my feelings, my real sort of like raw emotion, and how what I would have expressed otherwise, maybe physically. So I think I try to compensate in so few words, I would say, but really it's about communication. So I try to make it clear that, if it's not happening at the moment, then that's not particularly sort of, we were not at that particular point in time. It will come a bit later, maybe not today, but definitely at some other point. So I try not to create a schism out of a situation, out of an experience where sort of the meaning has to change,
Yeah, I completely relate to that.
When it comes to sex, there are so many things that we're even afraid to tell our friends, or our close friends, because it carries so much weight. And I'm grateful for both of you for us being able to have similar conversations. And I hope a lot of people are able to get into that space. But one thing I'm curious about is, if you go back into that space where you're in your early 20s and you're freaking out about this, what kind of things, if you can, time travel and step into your own life, what kind of things would you tell yourself, or that you think might have been helpful for us to have a conversation about together back then?
Right. So I think this is, one of those questions where it's, the hindsight, 2020 sort of bias can kick in. But, notwithstanding that, I definitely wouldn't fret too much about the actual sort of physical side of it, because there's a lot of clear sort of guidance on that particular point. And I think I would have asked myself to be a bit more nuanced and understand, is this my partner? Is this me? Is this my body? What is speaking? Listen, stop thinking, stop sort of reacting, try to take this information and make something out of it that actually benefits you at the moment and kind of puts you in a position of empowering you, actually. So, and also to be vulnerable to that and accept, because otherwise you may not, you may not accept the right kind of response or answer. I mean, it could be something as brutally simple as it's not the right time of day, maybe you're too tired, you know what I mean? And, just give it till the morning. It was also an amazing discovery, right? So it's, how one feels in the morning. And so for me, it was just discover a bit more how your body reacts, how, what your mind is telling you about yourself and your partner and your situation.
I love that. And I love the concept of listening to what even something like erectile dysfunction has to tell us, right? There's information there, rather than trying to make it work or force it to work like the media tells us, whether that's chemically or with whatever psychological trick you may try, sometimes listening is actually knowledge waiting to be uncovered for us about ourselves, about our bodies, about what we like, what we don't like.
Absolutely.
So thanks for sharing all of that.
It was actually quite cathartic.
Well, do you feel complete? Should we put the next men under the spotlight, or is there anything else you want to share before we close?
No, I think it's time that we, that we have another story for better or for worse. I think it's time.
I'm next up to bat. Okay, cool. But thank you, Darsh, for sharing. I couldn't tell you how much the sense of camaraderie that exists between us is very important, and I certainly wouldn't have the courage to be talking about my story if it hadn't been for you guys and just knowing that the safe space exists. And thank you for leading the way.
All right, so we're going to transition from Darsh's story, where we explored stress mainly as a factor that causes erectile dysfunction, to Khalid's story, which is a slightly different cause and topic. And I'm excited to have you share another one of your guttural stories, Khalid.
Sure. Let me just preamble by saying that any puns are completely and utterly unintended. I feel like I might drop a few, and I just want to say that I didn't mean it. So I guess my story also shares a lot of similarities.
It is a very hard topic. It is an extremely
there you go.
hard topic.
One for the books. Shakers on the board. All right. I'm going to refrain. I'm going to be the mature one and refrain from such frivolities. But I guess anchoring us back, hearing Darsh's story, there's a lot of similarities. Like Darsh, my story started in early 20s when I first caught sight of the problem. But unlike him, let me just, I guess, take a step back. My girlfriend at the time, we were together for a couple of years, and then she went back home. So it had been like a year that we hadn't seen each other. So we were doing the long distance thing. During said year, I guess I developed a porn habit. I've always had a porn habit, but it had been a while since I've watched porn. So in her absence, I guess I reverted to my old prepubescent ways and spent a lot of time watching porn. So when it came time to see her again, I left to see her. My penis was just a complete no-show. And later I would find that porn-induced ED is actually a very real thing. And it does change the neurochemicals in your brain. And it takes you a while to get out of it, but it's a very much a real thing. And it's one of the leading causes of ED in men. I think the interesting thing is that the reasons for my shame kind of shifted as I grew older. Back when it first happened, it was basically my masculinity was under attack. And so I was carrying a lot of shame because I tied my sexual prowess to my understanding of myself as a man and how I viewed myself. It was only very recently that I've come to feel shame for completely different reasons. And I think that reason being is I remember now the way I reacted when my penis didn't work. I went into this whole tirade. Basically, I gaslit the shit out of my girlfriend. And it was like, you were being cold and you were being distant. And that's why my penis is not working. And it's all you. And I was projecting and I was attacking. And I basically distorted her entire reality because I didn't want to admit that it was me. It was probably because I was watching too much porn that I've kind of oversaturated my brain. And now I feel a lot of shame about the way that I treated her and the way that I kind of made her feel when it was just me and my fears and my insecurities and my precious masculinity acting up. So I guess, ED, and I don't know about you guys, but it's not a one and done type situation. I'm not ashamed to say that that was not the only time that I've struggled with ED in my past. It's something that, whether it be stress, whether it be the wrong time of day, there are so many factors that go into your equipment not acting the way that you maybe would like. But I've also come to appreciate the underlying reasons, and it's given me a much needed pause to reflect on why this is happening. And sometimes my body is trying to tell me something. Whether I'm there to be able to listen or not, I think is a different story. But I've come to appreciate these moments when they do happen. So I guess that's kind of it in a nutshell. That's my story with ED.
Thanks, Philip. That's thanks for sharing that. That's actually really quite quite raw. And I'm having heard this maybe a long time ago, it's also always interesting to hear from you now and to see your perspective on it today and how you feel about that. And I think about it, and I think about how this particular issue, this one issue with porn that you were, that this situation has managed to, to get you to like reconsider or to reassess, the benefit of porn in your life, and do you feel like as a person you kind of look at porn differently today?
That's a really good question, Darsh. And actually, yes, my relationship to porn has switched entirely after I was able to admit to myself that that was probably the reason for my ED, because it didn't happen right away. It took me a while for me to be able to admit that to myself. But once I did, I stopped watching porn. I cut it out entirely. There were moments of weaknesses along the way, but the trajectory was, this is not probably a bad thing, and for a multitude of reasons. But in so far as it affects my interpersonal relationships and my romantic and my physical intimacy, it probably does more damage than good. And now as much as I have my struggles, but there is a conviction that watching porn is ultimately detrimental for my sexual and my intimate health. So, I cut it out, and I try not to partake.
Right.
I try to do other things now, but
right, because it's also very sorry. I just I just to stop you from getting too guilty about that, because we've all resorted to porn at some point or another, and is really discovering it this way is a very rude awakening, since porn was in a lot of senses our way of getting through certain things and just relaxing and de-stressing, and and here it's kind of one thing that I wanted to kind of gauge from where you stand right now is, how do you feel about your older self, and have you forgiven, or do you feel like you need to forgive your older self for even watching porn back then? That shame, is it become guilt? Is it become something that you carry with you? Because I surely hope not.
Yeah, no, I don't think that there's any guilt or shame around my porn viewing. if there's anything, it's just, had I known what I know now, I might have done things differently. But absolutely, I mean, I think that a lot of people have a healthy relationship with porn. I just so happened that for my own personal experience, it was ultimately more damaging than it was useful.
Yeah, I'm glad that we're not, trying to vilify porn. Also, there's a lot of good that can come, a lot of maybe inspiration that can come from it, and it's just kind of like every other tool in life. How do we use it? And are we using the hammer for a nail, or are we using the hammer to beat ourselves up on our heads? And it's like it's a very different. There are many different ways of experiencing it. And one thing I wanted to ask you, Khaled, before we close this session, thank you for, I think, one of the things that struck me about how you shared vulnerably is not just the porn, but even perhaps more interestingly, how you have come to acknowledge the kind of gaslighting that can happen between men and women, and you being able to own up to that, I think, is huge for all of us and really inspiring. Because at that age, I feel like when we don't have that self-conscious kind of mindset, we want to blame others because it's a terrifying feeling that, oh, we have this, and that's why I don't like the label also of ED, because then, oh, I have this thing now, and it must be someone else's problem. And I'm also, kind of curious to know if you have any lingering thoughts about that. Can you also forgive yourself for freaking out, basically, about that? And in a more useful way, kind of how do you maneuver these conversations now when they happen versus then?
I'll answer the easier part of that question first. Now, when it does happen, my knee-jerk reaction is to be completely honest with the person that I'm with. And instinctively, I know if I'm with the right person, if I feel any type of resistance to me being able to tell that person how I'm actually feeling. Because if I feel like I'm going to be judged, then that's probably not the right person that I should be vulnerable and sharing myself with. But if I had made the right decisions leading up to the act, then I should be in a situation where I feel comfortable discussing anything that might arise. So I think it's kind of like an interesting bellwether to the kind of situation that you've put yourself in. As to the harder part of that question, I don't think, if it was just contained within myself, I think I could have done the work to not feel that guilt or shame anymore. I think because it affected someone else and I have little control over how that impacted her moving forward, I am less able to move past it because I could forgive myself, but regardless of whether or not I've made my peace with it, I've still done some damage, some real damage to another human being. And yes, I did apologize, and yes, I tried to explain when I first became cognizant of that reality, but these kind of scars have a way of lingering and manifesting themselves in other aspects and in other relationships. So I forgave myself for as much as I could, but there is definitely some lingering feelings that I can't easily extricate myself from.
When we don't process things, they can come up in new relationships that have nothing to do with these old scars. So I'm curious for you, like what's the path forward now that you're aware of maybe some remaining guilt? Like what kind of, I guess, tools or journeys that you can look forward to in order to not have that bleed into future relationships? Because I think that's kind of the only thing that we have going is like what's going to happen rather than what happened. And again, like when we go back in time, sometimes we undervalue how much we know, or, like Dash said, hindsight 2020. So sometimes we judge our past selves for, not being wise enough, but we forget that we were operating under the knowledge that we had back then. And so, from that sense of self-compassion, what do you think your options are now that you've had that kind of experience but still want to relate to people authentically moving forward?
Well, I was trying to make the point that insofar as I'm concerned, the guilt or shame that is connected to how I felt my masculinity was assailed when my penis wasn't working, for the most part, I think I've made my peace with it. And to your point, it's actually because you become also aware of how limited you are at any given point in time. And the only thing that you can hope for is growth. And so looking back, I can definitely remember a very young and very ignorant version of myself that didn't know any better. So I definitely look at that version of myself with a lot of compassion. But insofar as the damage that that person did to other people, that is very real. The other part that I think that you touched upon is that moving forward, how can we not repeat past mistakes? And I think it's being aware when our masculinity is being triggered and sitting in that moment and realizing, do I want to feed that or do I want to acknowledge it and realize that no good will come out of basically being a victim to my very reptilian brain reacting in a very reptilian way. And it's a very primitive, and I think that trusting that I have done the work, that I am no longer the same person. And so letting go is a lot of it, but also acknowledging that just because my knee-jerk reaction at the moment is to go to that defensive primal place, I don't have to stay in that spot and I can move past that. And it really is all about the person that you're with and how comfortable you are in that situation.
Does your story feel complete, buddy?
It does indeed, my friend.
That's terrible news, because then that means I have to go into the hot seat now.
Doctor, you've gathered your friends here and you've got them saying all kinds of uncomfortable stories, but I don't think you can escape your turn, and your turn is up. So pretty please, with sugar on top, give us your story.
Damn it, I don't think any other podcast host that I listen to keeps getting the tables turned on him this way. And this hosting business is becoming very hard. Again, second pun. This one not intended. But yeah, thank you both for being here and sharing these stories and sharing the different ways ED can come up. And for me, my first experience with erectile dysfunction also happened in my early 20s, and I remember I was 23. At that point, I had not had penetrative sex with anyone. And growing up in Egypt, you guys know, you grew up there with me, and sex is a very taboo topic. My first girlfriend did not want to have sex before marriage, and we never got married, so we never had actual sex. And at that point, I was craving sexual experiences, and I felt like it was part of my initiation into life, part of, I wanted to be able to even come back to you guys and talk to you about, there's this thing called sex and I have experienced it too, And it felt like a rite of passage that I was looking for. And so when the time came for me to actually have a chance at it, it was with a woman that was much older. She was very extreme, I would say, in many ways. And the fact that she already was with multiple partners, and I was like maybe third or fourth in line. So that seemed appealing at first. I found her beautiful, and I had met her in a random club, and the next day found myself going on a trip with her. And I remember when she first saw me in the light, she was like, "Oh, you look too young." And I was like, "No, it's too late. We're going on this trip." And when the time came for us to get hot and heavy, I remember being jarred by the experience in so many ways, but trying to put on a brave face. And the biggest cause that I would say my penis wasn't complying was because also, being the extreme person that she is, she offered me cocaine, and I had never tried cocaine. I didn't even know what cocaine does. And I indulged in that experience while not really knowing what to do, but I think that was part of the bigger theme of wanting to appear like I know exactly what I'm doing, even though I did not know anything about this, either sex or cocaine. And shortly after, I felt the buzz coming on, and I think that gave me that exaggerated my feeling of false confidence, and that then led to us being physical, but me just not having an erection at all. And I was jarred because then she started asking me things about, how can we fix this, and telling me about like solutions that are out there, and telling me about other drugs that I can take to fix this, and that there are, ways for me to maneuver this. And I remember just feeling so small in that moment. I remember learning that, everything I knew about sex at that point was use protection, do not come inside, and try to last as long as possible. And
All wise.
and I did not hit any of the 3 marks. So I took out the condom, and then I think she felt offended. She threw it out, and I felt like, I almost felt bad to be using a condom. And so at that point, like I just, I willed my penis into an erection, even though everything felt super wrong. And I just worked so hard that day to get that erection, which then I ended up having unprotected sex and came inside, and it took like 20 seconds or so, which I, realize now is just, all of these are part of the overarching kind of story where I just completely felt out of my comfort range. And I think I was expecting that I'm with an older person, that there would be some kind of guidance, but it was ultimately terrible for both of us. It took me a while to come out of that, for sure. I remember driving her home that night and feeling ultimately not even half or a quarter of the man I thought I was. And it ultimately took me some time to gain my sense of even normalcy as a man in society. And I was terrified to tell anyone about this. So it feels very cathartic to share it. And thanks for putting me in the hot seat. It sucks to be here.
Well, maybe I can, switch one of your questions that you had previously asked Khaled, because I'm really curious. So how does this experience, affect the journey, the adventures, and sort of how has it inspired you moving forward from that point to get to this point today? How did that sort of organically develop? How did you grow into the person or the attitudes that you have today?
Yeah, I think, a big part of my experience was the consumption of a drug that I didn't know about. Had I known about cocaine, what it does to the blood vessels, what it does to sex, I would have taken a step back. And it's and even now, after understanding what cocaine does, it's still not something I enjoy consuming. But I just understood, I think at that point, that there are many, what I consume generally affects sexual encounters. And taking that into account, I started being more conscious of what's generally going in my body. So I'm not just talking about substances in all their ways, but also like hydration and food and how my energy levels are. And on a relational level, it's more of, I realize that I really enjoy intimacy, and and that there's like some kind of threshold for intimacy that I have. Once I cross it, sex becomes not just effortless, but becomes like something that's really hard to stop for me. Versus this idea of like, I need to build up for this threshold to happen towards the erection. And when it feels like an uphill battle, and I think that even applies to relationships in general, like if it feels like an uphill battle, then maybe this is the wrong relationship, And then I think the last thing I would say is to echo what Khaled said in his share, that the conversation needs to be dynamic for me about this. I need to be able to, it's almost like a nice test with someone, because for me, like almost all my first sexual encounters with people are the most awkward and the worst sexual encounters. The more I build intimacy, the more I feel like I have trust and companionship with someone, the better sex becomes. And I realized that over time. And I think some of the narratives we have, even around like being with someone for a long time, that, it's really hot and heavy in the beginning, and then towards the end, it tapers off. And that's not my experience at all, actually. If I see sex as like an exponential curve, and I also hope to be having sex, if I live up to 70 or 80, to still be having sex, And I think there is, the more you learn about your body, the more enjoyable it needs to become. So also taking away this idea that I need to be having all the sex I can in my 20s or my 30s, that there's actually more to explore and to enjoy as one grows older.
Yeah, definitely. The adventure continues.
Yes. Hopefully not like that first adventure, but more grounded adventures.
I have a question, and feel free not to answer it if it feels like it's maybe pushing some sort of boundary. But you mentioned that that first sexual partner that you had, she said that there are things that you can do, chemical assistance, so to speak, that you can partake in. Having sought that chemical assurance before, I am very curious as to if you have any experience or any light that you can shed on that particular aspect of the act of making love, so to speak. And if so, what can you tell us about it?
Damn it, Khaled. Yes, I have something to share and some things to tell you about this. So, to be quite frank, this experience that I just shared really shook my confidence because, again, the first one, and I felt like my just dick won't work. And so then I started dating someone, and we started having sex, and the first few times that I had sex, I needed Viagra. So I went to the pharmacy and bought some of them blue pills, and I remember having the opposite problem. So like the next sexual encounter had me with a boner that just will not secede. It would not give up. And we had the sex was done, and my partner was satisfied, but then I remember just continuing to have an erection, and it was almost painful at that point. And I wanted to finish, but I couldn't. And that felt equally self-conscious in a way, because I was like, okay, I have, blood gushing through my penis, but this whole experience isn't coming to an end. And because I also wasn't honest with her about this, so I could not tell her that, oh, this is happening because I'm on Viagra. And then back to like the idea of gaslighting, I made it seem like, oh, I'm into it, and I need to keep on going. And it took a really long time for me to end this sexual experience. And so I think it's, again, it's a tool, and it's interesting to use Viagra, especially if you are into more of a, sexual experience that is not traditional, that is not with someone that you're particularly comfortable with. It could help, but I think, again, just being honest about the fact that you're using it can help make also the experience more intimate in a way. Because I remember not really, enjoying the physical aspect of it that much. As much as I enjoy sex without Viagra, when I'm in an intimate relationship, and there's, I think just being removed from the natural ebb and flow of things, and also just experiencing myself go up and down, so to speak, emotionally too, not just physically, throughout the sex, and maybe like, the erection happens for a while, and then we take a break, and then we come back for a second session. All that becomes a really beautiful part of the dance, versus, all right, I'm erect and we must go on forever. And it's like, even painful for the other person, physically also, because she can't get a break, and not that enjoyable. So, drugs are bad, kids, but sometimes they can be useful. And it's just about understanding what you're consuming, and understanding how that impacts the other person, and understanding how it impacts your own physical body is key, especially in sexual experiences, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I feel like that kind of mirrors my experience with it. So it was very validating to hear someone who went through pretty much a similar feeling and came with very similar conclusions to what I've also independently reached. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks, doctor.
You're welcome, guys. Yeah, this was definitely very cathartic, and it's interesting. Like, again, the act of recording this podcast creates a lot of intimacy even between us, and like, being able to share these stories together means a whole lot. So thanks for asking these very thoughtful and provoking questions.
Do you feel complete, Saya?
I do.
Awesome.
Unlike the time that I was on Viagra.
Really coming in hot.
All right, so this topic is not one that we can easily find a closure for, or a closing point. And even though we've shared a lot of these experiences in the past, I just want the audience to know that these are things that we continue to carry through our 30s. And a lot of it has to do with our sense of masculinity, what's being told to us in the media. And so I think a good closing point may be to ask each of us to reflect on what current mindsets we have on erectile dysfunction, and maybe elaborate on, one or two rituals that you have now around sex.
When it first happened for me, it was stress that kind of pushed me over, and it's stress that I feel that I'm most vulnerable to today as well. I mean, having being in this stage of life where you don't have the power of the testosterone sort of fueling you, that and supporting your libido. I think that's something that gets me to think about how often will stress, and how deep will my stress affect me, and what kind of lifestyle should I live, and this, everything from decisions related to what kind of consumables. So, should I be smoking? Should I be exercising more? Yes, definitely exercise more. No, definitely not smoke. But generally, to also feel like, what kind of emotional stress can I handle? And when I think about the decisions that I have to take in the future, what kind of emotional stress would I be able to handle then? And so it's a very alive in that sense.
Hearing Darsh talk, there's a lot of similarities, and I mirror a lot of what he's saying. It is an ongoing thing. It's never going to go away. Of course, the challenges might be slightly different from when we were younger, but ED is something that will carry. Nobody is cured from ED. It's something that will afflict us at one point or another throughout our entire lives. So I think coming to terms with that is kind of like the biggest takeaway that I could have about it, is that it's never something that you can completely cure.
Really good food for thought. I think for me, I refrain from one-night stands, despite how much media tells me to, because I know that they don't work for me and they don't satisfy the need for intimacy that I have. As a matter of fact, they make me feel worse the next day, most of them. So I have just accepted that about myself and try not to make the quick sexual encounter culture, especially for me living in San Francisco, affect my actual needs. I feel like I would have loved to hear this episode when I was in my early 20s, and I feel like the intention that we set to ground ourselves in our own personal experiences and just share a few things that have worked for us specifically has been honored through this. So I think we did a great job in that regard, and I have a feeling that this will not be the last appearance for either of you on the Gumcast. Any last words before we close?
I mean, if this is how it's like on every episode, then my goodness, I'm feeling really happy to have this space, to have this the trust that we have and the capacity to explore this and to discover these truths, whether they're comfortable or uncomfortable together. It sometimes it helps. Actually, most times it helps, especially the uncomfortable ones. So always share, always speak your mind, always, try to find a way to let those words ring true, ring out, and keep doing what you're doing. Thanks for having me here, man.
Keep it up. And I guess this time I did mean to make a pun.
Thank you for listening. Now it's your turn to get in touch with us and share some of your stories that we would love to hear. You can do that at findgumption.com. That's findgumption.com. Subscribe for free, and you can comment or send us an email in private telling us about what kind of stories come up for you and which parts of our own stories resonated with you. We would love to hear from you. And also by subscribing, you will get the Sunday updates for this whole project, including the announcement of episode 15, where I will be interviewing another one of my high school friends who is the Dean of the African Leadership Academy in South Africa, and we will tackle some of his experiences growing up with me as a Sudanese living in Egypt, and also about some of his time that he spent at Harvard and how he perceived race there versus his current life in Johannesburg in South Africa. And I'd love to give a huge shout out to Mustafa Al-Aizabi, who has produced this episode to make us sound crisp and clear for your auditory pleasures. This is Omar Shaker. Subscribe at findgumption.com, and I'll see you next time.